Give them a shot to do what?
That was fire, by the way.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Punch podcast presented by the Give Us a Shot Network. I apologize about the late start. If you want to know why, head over to the Give Us a Shot Network, tap into the most recent episode of the Protect Our Queens podcast. We have the one and only Lauren Mincy on the show, and she asked me a question at the end of the show that almost spun me into a mental breakdown that I will sure have. Give it 20 minutes into the show, and you will see me shed some grown man tears, possibly. Once again, joining Justin and I on the show is our guy, Shane Fordham, host of No Shame with Shane. And unfortunately, he is an Eagles fan. So there might be some tap dancing on the Packers' grave being done tonight, but that's all right. Fellas, how are we doing
today? Can you crit what? Can you crit? You know that? Can you gritty? Can you make gritty all over us? Can you
Hey, if this was like a in studio type thing,
certainly would.
Hey, a couple things I'm upset about, but overall, I'm in a gritty mood overall.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about, guys. Not a lot of time to get into it. We appreciate all of you guys who are watching live. Please do not be afraid to drop comments and interact with us live as we're talking on the show. As we know, unfortunately, the Packers fall in week 1 to the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFL's first game played in South America on Brazilian soil, 29-31. There are a lot of ups and a lot of downs on both sides of the coin. We'll start with you, Shane, specifically for your Philadelphia Eagles and Jalen Hurts, especially. If you had to give a letter grade, A through F, for Jalen Hurts in week 1, how would you grade Jalen Hurts' 2024 season debut?
I would give Jalen Hurts like a C or C+, honestly. I mean, he was not a reason that the Eagles won. You know, he had some great plays here and there. You know, he found AJ Brown out deep for that catch and run tud, that beautiful pass to Saquon Barkley on that wheel route, corner of the end zone. And then he had a couple of, save us plays with his legs, getting the first down for us, especially in that last 2 minutes of the game, but overall, I mean, we saw multiple points where Jalen Hurts, I mean, just you didn't know who he was trying to throw to, or you knew who he was trying to throw to, but you couldn't understand why. Like, there were definitely a bunch of questionable balls that we saw from Jalen Hurts. And I mean, 2 of which were interceptions, one being by, a big free agency pickup by you guys in Xavier McKinney, someone who I'm excited to see what he does this year. But I mean, there were several others that could have easily been interceptions too. And not only interceptions, they were interceptions that could have lost us the game. Because, I mean, a couple of those throws were like in the flat, and, we're out to the flat.
There's one in particular when I'm oh my God, what is his name from the punt returner? Keyshawn Nixon. Mm-hmm. He should have had a pick 6 on one of those. Oh,
yeah. I mean, and if one of those are caught, let alone ran back, because a couple of those, the field was wide open. If the DB just catches it, I mean, that could have easily been an easy house call for him. So, I mean, if one of those throws were intercepted or ran back, I mean, that changes the entire game. I mean, it'd be a whole different vibe with us on this show right now, so I mean, Jalen Hurts was definitely shaky. I mean, I'm not expecting to see that version of Jalen Hurts moving forward, but if that's something we are going to see from Jalen Hurts, throughout this season, I mean, the Eagles, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the Eagles would definitely be a first round exit again this year if that's the performance, the consistent performance that we're supposed to be seeing from Jalen Hurts this year.
I'm going to give him a C-, particularly because just what you mentioned, Shane, those 2 interceptions and the third that should have been a pick 6 that probably swings the game in the Packers' favor.
Yeah.
Why it's not lower than a C- is because obviously that you mentioned, he is responsible for what I term as that game-winning drive, holding on to the ball for what I think they held on for more than 5 minutes towards the end of the fourth quarter, and that essentially decided the game in my estimation. So, and I think you also touched on it. He had a big third down conversion with his legs. And without that, you're giving Packers probably a little over 2 minutes to play, probably two timeouts. I think timeouts with the ball, and a litany of weapons in which Vic Fangio had a little problem. I don't know, slowing down early first half. So yeah, I'm going to give him a C minus. Those balls were not, his accuracy was a lot better, like left a lot to be desired. I will see. I thought the game plan by Jeff Hafley, I don't want to say exposed, but kind of, showed him up a bit, because I think Hafley did everything in his power to make sure that Hurts didn't get on the perimeter and extended plays. He did a lot to make sure that he wasn't, creating on the outside. So in a lot of cases, you saw Isaiah McDuffie being the spy. And I did not realize how fast Isaiah McDuffie was, because Jalen Hurts is no slouch. And every time he got on the outside, you saw, and it was not a spy where you'd expect this spy to be. The spy was a deeper back than anticipated. And every time Jalen Hurts tried to break the pocket, tried to extend plays on the perimeter, Isaiah McDuffie or a safety just ran him down. And I thought that was a great game plan. But I can't take anything away from him, because when y'all needed him the most, he came out with that game-winning drive, holding the ball for, I think, over 5 minutes in the fourth quarter.
I'm going to go right in the middle. I'm going to give him a C for all the reasons mentioned. But the big thing for me is, and I know that there's
yeah, the gods don't want to hear about Jalen Hurts anymore.
They don't want to hear about him. I don't want to hear about him either, but it's fine. So I'm going to give him a C. And the reason why, and I want to preface this by saying I'm in no way, shape, or form saying that Jalen Hurts is not an elite quarterback. But I just want to make something crystal clear. If you are going to say that a quarterback is elite, then what that means is one of two things. Either that quarterback is winning you games you have no business winning, or when everything else around him is failing, he's stepping up to the occasion and he's winning you a football game. Neither of those things were true on Friday.
Matt Stafford, good gosh.
And neither of those things happened on Friday night. What we saw is a football team. I don't want to say win in spite of Jalen Hurts, because Jalen Hurts wasn't god awful on Friday. So I don't want to say they won in spite of him, but they certainly didn't win because of him. They just won the football game. And I'm not saying this because I'm a Packers fan. I'm saying this because I think it's true. And Shane, you might agree with me, maybe based on your assessment of how the game went. I think you might agree with me. I would say that Green Bay lost this game more than the Eagles won this game, to me. And the reason why I say that is because you can point at several instances from an offensive standpoint on Green Bay's part, where you'd say, well, you're talking about a touchdown that's erased because of a hold. The touchdown to who was it? Was it Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs?
No, Jaden Reed went 12.
Right, Jaden Reed had
both teams had 12.
Right, we had both teams had 12 on the field, and I know what was happening there. Jordan Love was trying to do the Aaron Rodgers classic. He was trying to catch that 12th man running off the field late, but he didn't even realize that we had our own 12th man that was on the field late. So that negated the touchdown. We had another big play or something that was negated because of a hold. There was the missed field goal by Braden Arvison that essentially, if you look at the score, or at least the position that we were in down the stretch, we're probably not in a position where we need to drive down the field in that manner to even, score a touchdown to win. It's a position to maybe kick a field goal to tie, or a field goal to win rather than a touchdown, right? On the defensive side of the ball, we're talking dropped interceptions. We're talking blown coverages. If you take away, and I said this to my guy who's an Eagles fan, if you take away the 67-yard touchdown or whatever it was to A.J. Brown to open up the first half or the second half, A.J. Brown had like 40 yards receiving in this game. So the secondary for the most part did its job. The pass rush for the most part, at least the front four, as far as containing Jalen Hurts until that final drive, did its job. The linebacking core left a lot to be desired, in my opinion. But I don't look at this as Jalen Hurts and the Eagles came out here in Brazil and just ran roughshod on the Packers. This game was everything I thought it was going to be. It was a match of wits, and it was a shootout. And it was unfortunately a shootout that the Packers were just unprepared in certain instances to be able to manage. I don't think this was like the boat race that a lot of Eagles fans thought it was going to be. You look at Jalen Hurts' numbers, 20 for 34, 278, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. Like, for a guy who's supposed to be elite, that's a pretty pedestrian stat line to me. And so when I look at Jalen Hurts, do I expect him to play better than what he played this week? Obviously, because I do think that Jalen Hurts is a top 7 quarterback at worst, with an argument to be top 5 at his very best. Right, I think we're still waiting to see that. At least I am. That's why I'm kind of harder on Jalen Hurts in some regard. But I don't look at this as a failure by Jalen Hurts, but I certainly don't look at this as a success on Jalen Hurts' part either. I think Jalen Hurts did just enough to keep the Eagles in a position not to lose this game. And a lot of that has to do with, as you guys both mentioned, the 5, 6, however long minute drive to close out where he got a chunk of those 13 carries for 33 yards on that drive. That is where I give Jalen Hurts a C. Because I'll be completely honest with you. If you take that, if we extrapolate that drive from everything and we just look at everything else, I would probably give him a C minus D plus. Because at no point in that game did I look at Jalen Hurts and say, wow, Jalen Hurts is really carving up this Packers defense. Like, Jalen Hurts was a very pedestrian quarterback in that game. And that's who we like. And most quarterbacks in week one, especially like the great quarterbacks who don't get as much run in the preseason, obviously they tend to have a pretty pedestrian first week or two. So you're like, again, not a black mark or a demerit on Jalen Hurts on it by any stretch of the imagination. But again, for an elite quarterback, this was not a Jalen Hurts won the Eagles the game, or this was not a, Jalen Hurts won this game in spite of other deficiencies for Philadelphia. This was just Jalen Hurts was essentially a game manager. He did what he needed to do to keep the Eagles from losing the game. And so that's why I give him a C. We've seen him play much better than when he played on Friday night. Is essentially the point that I'm getting at, basically.
I'm giving Jalen Hurts a C for slightly different reasons. Like everything you said, I agree with, except for Jalen Hurts. I think this was in fact a failure on Jalen Hurts' part, because, like you said, we know Jalen Hurts as a guy who is arguably at his best a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. This was a guy who was left off of the league-wide quarterback top 10 list. Dak Prescott was on there before him. Brock Purdy was on there before him. Like, there were several other quarterbacks who were included on that list ahead of Jalen Hurts.
I hear that Brock Purdy's put on people's top 10 list, but that's another conversation for another time.
The point is, like, Jalen Hurts, we know, is a guy who definitely should have been included on that list, top 10 at the least. So, and the game you're talking about, Marcus, talking about a game manager, a quarterback that won't put a team in a position to lose. We saw a lot of that in Jimmy G. That was Jimmy G's specialty in San Francisco. All they needed him to do was to manage the game, not turn the ball over, not put the team in a position to lose. He didn't have to win the game. Rarely was he ever expected to win the game for the 49ers, but he also wasn't expected to lose the game. Friday night, Jalen Hurts had multiple instances where he could have lost that game for the Eagles. I mean, he had 2 picks, but he had like 3 other questionable throws that could have either been interceptions or pick six that would have basically sealed the game. So there were several instances where Jalen Hurts could have very easily lost that game for the Eagles. And I think the only thing that really made up for Jalen Hurts' performance was Saquon Barkley's performance. Like, if Saquon wasn't who he was Friday night, that would have been way more of a losable game for us than it already was. You know what I mean? Like, if Jimmy G, like many instances, Christian McCaffrey was the reason the 49ers didn't lose a game back when they were on the team, had sort of overlapping careers in San Francisco. Like, people didn't look at Jimmy G as much of a problem with Christian McCaffrey there. People didn't look and we can see that, just in what you said. People aren't looking at Jalen Hurts as much of a problem on Friday night because of the impact Saquon Barkley had on the game, which is why that signing was so significant, because I don't think DeAndre Swift could have had that big of an impact on a game like that, which is what makes Saquon Barkley different. So my thing is, I think this very much was a failure on Jalen Hurts' part because of what we expect from him at his best. Last year he wasn't 100% healthy. He had knee problems. He broke his fingers towards the end of last season. This season, Jalen Hurts is fully healthy. So we're expecting to see an MVP level Jalen Hurts this season that we're in now. So seeing that performance, as you described, pedestrian performance, anything less than a not even a superstar performance, but anything less than a good performance where he's not turning the ball over is a failure to me in my book.
That's a good point. I mean,
Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, and that's fair. So we talk about Saquon Barkley. Obviously, Saquon has the hat trick, and you mentioned initially how surprising that was. Like when we were off the show, as far as like not expecting Saquon to have that immediate of an impact. Night one on the job, essentially, right? I'm sure you guys saw it. Our guy MJ, host of Real Talk with MJ, and a bunch of other shows because he's all over the place, right? He got a lot of slack. He got a lot of heat from a lot of different people a couple weeks ago because he said that he felt that Saquon Barkley would have a impact in Philly similar to the impact that Christian McCaffrey has in San Francisco, and it seems based on just one game in a one-game sample size that MJ hit the nail right on the head. So
exactly the case.
I want to blow the picture up a little bit here because when we talk about, obviously you mentioned the Eagles wanting to, get back to a Super Bowl caliber football team where we're not just making it to the Super Bowl and outplaying the other team, but we're making it to the Super Bowl and winning the whole thing.
Right.
How much of an impact does Saquon Barkley have, especially now after seeing him play one game and seeing how dominant he can be? How do you think, like, if you had to assess his impact on the Eagles' chances, how much wider or how much closer to the Eagles are the Eagles to a Super Bowl now that Saquon is in the backfield as opposed to when they had, DeAndre Swift and the others that they've had back there?
I think it's just like how you said, like he's the difference between making it to the NFC Championship game, making it to the Super Bowl, to actually winning the Super Bowl, to getting the job done, especially when we actually have a coach who knows how to utilize him in Kellen Moore this year, which was evident. If you watch that game Friday night, you could see that, way more of a strategic offensive game plan than what we worked with for, really 99% of last season under Ben Johnson, and a lot of people forget that Saquon Barkley is just as good of a running back as Christian McCaffrey, both in the run and pass. It's not something that people are used to seeing because Christian McCaffrey has been on the 40. This is his second full year on the 49ers now. So he's had more time behind a premier offensive line. Saquon Barkley was doing what he was doing behind the Giants O-line, which was one of the worst O-lines in the league. Still is. Can't protect nothing. Can't stop a nosebleed. It's open season for Daniel Jones, DeVito, Tyrod Taylor, who was there last year. It's open season for whoever is quarterback in that pocket. So the fact that Saquon Barkley was as dynamic of a playmaker as he was behind that O-line, to say that Saquon Barkley wouldn't have at least a similar impact to Christian McCaffrey like he did on the 49ers in terms of Saquon Barkley's impact on the Eagles, it honestly is disrespectful because we're forgetting that Saquon Barkley at his best is a top 2, top 3 running back in the league, really fighting for that one spot. So I feel like the Saquon Barkley is definitely a difference maker just in terms of what he can do with the football in his hands in both the pass and the run. He's the definition of a difference maker. You have other backs like DeAndre Swift. You could even throw Josh Jacobs in that category. Running backs who are good, but aren't cut from that cloth like Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey. Maybe even a healthy Derrick Henry belongs in that category in terms of impact. But yeah, I definitely think Saquon Barkley is the difference between a championship team, a Super Bowl winning team, as opposed to a runner-up or just an NFC championship game team.
So Justin, I want to alter the question a little bit for you because last year when we looked at the quarterback play across the league, it was kind of tough for us to rationalize a quarterback winning the award. And so far in week one, just based on like the performances that we've seen, it feels like that we might be trending towards that way as well. Like we didn't really see a lot of eye-opening or eye-popping quarterback performances this year in week one. A lot of running backs had great performances though. When you look at Saquon Barkley, you look at where he's at in Philadelphia, a team that could potentially be competing for a championship. How likely do you think then on a scale of 1 to 10 that we could see, based on what we saw in week one, that we could potentially see Saquon Barkley legitimately in the running for MVP? Not just because quarterback play is down, but because he's in a position where he's playing and he's balling out on a week-to-week basis and he's actually moving the needle for Philadelphia? Like, how likely do you think it is that Saquon Barkley could potentially put together a case for MVP? Because we know he's going to be in the Offensive Player of the Year case just because he'll be healthy presumably all season. So we don't have to talk about Offensive Player of the Year, but for MVP, how likely do you think it is that we could see him legitimately in that conversation?
Are you asking me if how likely is he going to win, or how likely is he going to be in the MVP conversation?
Not that he's going to win, because like if just one quarterback plays up to standard with what we expect quarterbacks to play, they'll likely win the award. So we know what it takes for a non-quarterback to win an award. In fact, we're at the point now where in order for a non-quarterback, specifically wide receiver or running back, because it's not going to be a tight end or anything else, in order for a wide receiver or a running back to win the award, they're going to have to give you 2,000 rushing yards or 2,000 receiving yards.
Right. So
just to be in the conversation, how likely is it that he's in the conversation?
I give you an 8, and I say 8 because I was not surprised for 2 reasons. Sorry, I'm going to extend this very long. Coming out in that draft, this is going to shock y'all when I tell you this. When Cleveland was up to draft, and it had 2 of the top 4 picks in that draft, if people remember correctly, you wanted number 1 and number 4. I actually said, coming out of Penn State, I would have made Saquon Barkley my number 1 overall pick, and then number 4, Josh Allen. And this is before we all knew who Josh Allen was. I honestly went down because at that time I didn't think there was much of a difference between Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, and Sam Darnold. So I said that the best player in the draft, who I honestly thought was Saquon Barkley, and then you're not going to get Sam Darnold, you're not going to get Baker Mayfield, so you're comfortable with Josh Allen. What happened on Friday night is not a surprise, because I think a lot of people are judging Saquon Barkley on his 2 injury seasons in New York, and then when he's healthy, you're playing with a bunch of outside weapons. Like who? Forget the offensive line. Like your quarterback's best season in a contract season, he threw for 15 touchdowns, barely averaged 200 yards a game, and with 0 outside weapons. So like he's facing 9-man boxes every single down. Like with Philadelphia, you're not going to be able to do that. You have Devontae Smith, you have AJ Brown, you have Dallas Goedert. You cannot put 9-man boxes every single time against Philadelphia Eagles. And then even when you do have stacked boxes, as we saw over and over Friday night, like I think we forgot how much wiggle that Saquon Barkley has in his game. Like how often did he make that first man miss? And then when he wasn't making men miss in the backfield, how often was he dragging that first defender? Like, I think we forgot just how good Saquon Barkley is. I certainly did it. So I knew adding him with this amount of talent, where you're not just focusing on him, that you have to worry about the perimeter threats. You also have to worry about a quarterback who at his best is an MVP caliber player, who can also create on the perimeter as well. Like, everything points towards this man. Like, on Friday night, time and time again, there was no argument on who was the best player on the field. And it was number 26. Over and over and over again, he was the best player on the field. And we're talking about 2 quarterbacks who just got a ridiculous amount of money. We're talking about Jair Alexander. This was a loaded A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, the Packers wide receivers. There was loaded talent everywhere. Saquon Barkley was just by far better than everyone on the field. And I was so impressed that Kellen Moore, even despite the initial struggles for Saquon, that he gave him 26 touches. If you give Saquon Barkley 26 touches every single game, this man is going to be an MVP front runner easily.
And I'm glad you brought up the touches. I think that's something that's super important. We talked about offline, and we're going to get into Kellen Moore in just a second. But we talked about offline, like the importance of utilizing weapons, right? When you have a guy in Jalen Hurts as capable as he is, right, at throwing the football, at running the football, and at affecting the game in both ways, when you have a 1-2 punch at receiver that features an A.J. Brown and a Devonta Smith, you throw in there a healthy Dallas Goedert, that is probably, I would say off the top of my head, likely that is a top 5 pass catching trio in the NFL, right?
Plus Jahan Dotson.
Jahan Dotson.
Jahan Dotson.
Plus Jahan Dotson.
Well, Jahan Dotson.
I mean, 500 yards.
Let me refrain. Jahan Dotson doesn't suck. He comes to the Commanders suck, and the Commanders make anything they touch into poo instead of gold. So for all we know, Jahan Dotson could be the best third string receiver the NFL has ever seen. But I say that to say, when you are still able to, when you are Kellen Moore, and you are still able to find ways to give your star running back 24 carries and then also get him 2 looks out of the backfield as a receiver, and he's able to hit you with a tune of 109 rushing yards. I think he had 30-something receiving yards, and he ends up with 2 rushing touchdowns and a receiving touchdown, and that's only week 1. What that does for you, what Saquon Barkley does for this offense, as MJ was saying, as Shane said, it takes a lot of pressure off of Jalen Hurts. Now, Jalen Hurts doesn't have to be this superhuman guy, kind of like what we've been seeing with Josh Allen up in Buffalo, where he's got to be the leading rusher on the team. He doesn't have to do that. Not that Jalen Hurts was doing that in Philadelphia, but you know now that you can protect your asset in Jalen Hurts, a guy who you just paid a boatload of money to potentially lead you to another Super Bowl championship. When you have a guy in Saquon Barkley who is as dynamic as Christian McCaffrey, who we forget at one point in time, there was a legitimate argument being had about which of the two was better because they essentially played the position the exact same way. The difference is Christian McCaffrey had health on his side. And as we all know, the best ability is availability. But when you're behind a much better offensive line, when you're playing around a much better unit offensively, when you don't need to see the field as much because you have other running backs in the running back room who can be the third down back, who can take a couple carries off you here and there where you're getting that rest, where you're not, banging your body and causing all that stress on your body, on your ligaments, on your bones, the way that Saquon Barkley was in New York. That makes him a very viable candidate, not just for Offensive Player of the Year, but for MVP. Like Saquon Barkley, I strongly believe if not by like week 4, by week 8, the halfway point of the season, Saquon Barkley is going to remind everyone why he is at worst the 3rd, maybe 4th, if you're still counting Derrick Henry, best running back in the National Football League. I firmly believe. I don't think it's even going to take 4 weeks to remind you that. I feel like after one night on the job in Philadelphia, he can remind you. But I'll be honest, if everyone's healthy, Christian McCaffrey, I still think is bar none, just because he has the resume, right? The health and the resume on his side. I would say right after Christian McCaffrey, I would put Nick Chubb. I don't know if there's a better bell cow back in the league than Nick Chubb is, and so I would put him second. I don't know if there's another person I could definitively put ahead of Saquon Barkley. I know people are going to lean Derrick Henry because Derrick Henry and what he did in Tennessee, but like Saquon's also a much better receiver out of the backfield than Derrick Henry as well. So if Saquon Barkley keeps this up, and I'm not saying he's going to be, 3 touchdowns every single week. Obviously, that's a ridiculous pace to keep up. But if he just keeps this pace where he's still getting 24, 20 to 25 touches a game, spread out evenly, still getting rest in between, we're going to remind a lot of people, Saquon Barkley's going to remind a lot of people that he is still a top 3, top 4 running back in the NFL for sure.
But something, too, that people forget is Saquon was having injury issues in Carolina, too, before he went to San Francisco. Like, he wasn't always just Mr. Dependable, Mr. Reliable, like Mr. Available. Like, he had nicks and things that he was battling, too, part of which because he didn't have the same protection, obviously, in Carolina that he does now in San Francisco. So I think that is definitely kind of more to your point in terms of Saquon and Philly. That's something we're going to see in Saquon, too. People think Saquon is injury prone when he had nobody really blocking for him in New York. Now he's playing behind guys like Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata. He's got more protection up front. He's got better tackles to run off of. He can take it inside. He can take it off the tackle in between tackles. He's definitely a guy that is going to be able to hit those jump cuts behind the line of scrimmage, wait for a lane to open up and then take off and take the lane, So I definitely agree with you guys in terms of, Saquon getting the touches, can definitely be an MVP candidate, but that's a big tribute to Kellen Moore as well. Being able to find ways to get him those touches because part of the big conversation this offseason was which new addition running back is going to have a better season between Derrick Henry and the Ravens and Saquon Barkley to the Eagles. We saw this past week that Derrick Henry's problem is that they don't know how to include him in this offense. Saquon Barkley is clearly a better fit for the Eagles than Derrick Henry is for the Ravens. Looking at Derrick Henry is a guy that's used to getting 25, 20 touches a night, used to running from a QB under center offense, power I formation offense, where now they're trying to gel him into this offense that runs gun a majority of the time during their games, which does a lot for Lamar Jackson behind the line of scrimmage. So I definitely think that the coaching is going to play a big factor in terms of Saquon's production this year too, because we're seeing it. We saw it Friday night. Kellen Moore knows exactly how to use a back like Saquon Barkley, because there was many years where he had Austin Eckler out in Los Angeles, for the Chargers. So he knows how to use. This is a coach that knows how to use dynamic backs who are dangerous in the run and pass. And I think we're going to see a lot of that this year in Philly for sure.
So let's talk a little bit more about the coordinators, Kellen Moore and obviously Vic Fangio. Who would you say, and I have a feeling I know where you're going with this, who would you say was more impressive Friday night? Kellen Moore in the offense or Vic Fangio in the defense?
I don't know. We have to go over this. I think this should be like a minute long. And this is nothing against Fangio, right? Because I think both defenses were up against it simply because the litany of weapons that both teams have, and then how bad that field was. Like the offense is always going to have a leg up if the field is going to be that bad, because you're going to be slipping. You're reacting obviously because you don't know. Like you have to react to the offense. You're going to be out of place to make tackles. So I won't rate Fangio or Jeff Hafley in this game, but it was obviously Kellen Moore. And again, my major concern going into this game was how Kellen Moore was going to utilize all these weapons. But let me go through my list quickly. We talked about it: 26 touches for Saquon Barkley, which is over 130 something combined yards, 3 touchdowns. Then he also had 5 catches, 119 yards for AJ Brown, 7 catches for 84 yards with Devontae Smith. And you still found a way to work in Dallas Goedert. You found a way to spread the wealth, and it meant that Green Bay was always second guessing yourself, because there's nothing you can key or focus in on. I thought Green Bay still did a good job early on in the game, limiting Saquon and Jalen Hurts' runs. And to Kellen Moore's credit, that did not deter him from consistently going to Saquon over and over and over again. And the wheel route was the most impressive call of the night, because they did not see that coming. I legit didn't see. I don't even think Hafley saw that coming either. And so it was easily more. And again, this is nothing against Vic Fangio, because in my mind, Vic is one of the 4 best defensive coordinators in all of football, in my estimation. I absolutely love what Vic Fangio does. But how Kellen Moore utilized everyone, not just Saquon Barkley. You gave him 26 touches and still found a way for AJ Brown and Devontae Smith to have significant impacts. It's not like you sacrificed any one major weapon. Thought Kellen Moore was head and shoulders above everyone on Friday night.
Shane, I imagine you concur with the idea that Kellen Moore is more impressive. So I want to tweak again, just want to tweak the question just a little bit. Then we know what we expected of Kellen Moore heading into this season. And obviously, I think for a lot of people, we might have proved some people wrong about how his ability to spread the wealth with this, how talented this offense is. We expect Vic Fangio over time to walk into games where the defense is the star. We know that's going to happen because that's how Philly works. If the goal is to get back to the Super Bowl, which coordinator do you think needs to be more consistently great and more consistently on top of things? Is it Kellen Moore with the offense or Vic Fangio with the defense?
I like that question. I'm definitely going to go with Kellen Moore, because I think, our defense was definitely an issue last year, but our defense wasn't nearly as bad as our offense. Our offense, we were literally the most predictable offense in the entire NFL. I don't know which one was easier, whether it was between reading our offense or reading a Dr. Seuss book. That's how easy it was to read our offense. So the fact that, and we had the stars, we had the weapons to use in order to have a successful offense. AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, of course, Dallas Goedert. We had DeAndre Swift in the backfield, who, even though he was underutilized, was still a top 5 rusher last year in rushing yards. So I definitely think Kellen Moore is going to be a bigger factor than some people think, because it's not just about who you have on the field. It also matters in terms of who's calling the plays, right? As we know on here, we all talk football. We know this. The 49ers, they're not just dangerous because they have Debo. They joined Christian McCaffrey, and they added him to a team that already had Debo, Brandon Ayuk, Trent Williams in that O-line that they do, a versatile fullback in Juszczyk, so but it was the fact that they had Kyle Shanahan calling the shots behind Brock Purdy, that they had the offensive wizard in Kyle Shanahan orchestrating things from the sideline. You could say the same thing about the Chiefs. Yeah, they got Mahomes, they had Kelsey, they had Tyreek Hill, now they have Pacheco, all the different guys that they have in the mix. It wasn't just about them, not only just having the best quarterback in the game, arguably in the conversation right now, fighting for that GOAT status, the greatest of all time, but it's also that they had Andy Reid on the sideline manipulating things and calling things from the sideline. So Kellen Moore is definitely going to be a vital piece to this offense this year because, Vic Fangio, he wasn't Vic Fangio had a solid outing last night. The defense didn't look great, but it was dependable. It was sturdy. They got stops when we needed them to get stops. I think if Vic Fangio repeats the performance that he did last night, I think we could still be a winning football team throughout this regular season. It's really going to be on Kellen Moore taking on the majority of that load in terms of the offensive play calling, because we know if it's going to be up to Nick Sirianni, we're going to be back to running like Pee Wee Pop Warner football, just kind of running read options and QB draws all game, spamming Jalen Hurts, running him into the ground. So I definitely think Kellen Moore is going to be more vital in terms of us having a real Super Bowl shot in terms of coordinators.
I think you made a great point, especially when we're talking about the San Francisco 49ers component of this, because we want to be completely honest, right? Like, whether you like it or not, as a Philadelphia Eagles fan, they are the bar. Like, the Niners are the bar, at least in the NFC. The Chiefs are the bar overall, obviously. We know that. You're talking about the NFC. When you talk about what it takes to make it to the Super Bowl in the NFC, we're talking about a team, the San Francisco 49ers, that sit in the Kyle Shanahan era. Since they've taken over, they have been in the NFC Championship game, like 4 or 5 times in the last 6, 7, 8 years, however long it's been, right? They've been to the Super Bowl. We're talking twice now out of that. Like, they are the standard. And so when you want to beat the 49ers, what do you need? You need playmakers at all 3 levels on defense. You need a quarterback better than Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo is the standard for quarterback play, unfortunately, in the NFC as far as what it takes to get to I guess now it's Brock Purdy, since Brock Purdy's made it to a Super Bowl and Brock Purdy's better. But whoever it is, that's the standard, right? The offensive line needs to be elite, not just as a pass blocking offensive line, but as a run blocking offensive line. You need to have 2 receivers that are versatile, that you can line up anywhere, that can attack defenses in a myriad of ways, and a reliable and a reliable tight end who can not just hurt you in the pass, but can also be an effective run blocker. That's one thing about George Kittle that I feel like no one gives him credit for, is the fact that if you want to have an argument about who's better between George Kittle or Travis Kelce, say what you want about Travis Kelce's versatility and his explosiveness. The one thing Travis Kelce cannot do better than George Kittle is block, both as a pass blocker or a run blocker. And then, of course, you need to have a running back, or, as we saw in 2020 and 2021, a running back room that at any given point in time can take over a football game. Do the Eagles have a running back or running back room that can take over a football game? Absolutely. We saw that on Friday. Do they have at least 2 receivers who can hurt you all over the place? Absolutely. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith might just be the best 1-2 punch in the league at the wide receiver position. Maybe. You might give the edge to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, or Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, maybe, but they're certainly in that conversation, right? Do they have a guy at tight end who can affect the game as a passer and also block reliable? Absolutely. Dallas Goedert is one of the best in the business. Do they have an exceptional offensive line? The absence of Jason Kelce certainly hinders them a little bit, but as Cam Jurgens, gets his reps, as he gets more comfortable, I know we saw a couple of miscues on Friday, but he will do the same as well. Do you have a quarterback better, above the Brock Purdy, Jimmy G line? Absolutely you do. The one thing as well is you need to have a coordinator that can use all of these different pieces and actually make them into something, right? I can take the same type of ingredients. I can give them to my stepmother. I can give them to a lady on the street. And I bet you 9 times out of 10, my stepmother's going to do a lot better with them than some random lady on the street, because she knows what she's doing and this person might not. That's just the reality of the situation. If you don't know how to cook with the ingredients in the kitchen, get out of the kitchen. And I think that's what we were running into in Philadelphia, is there were a lot of people in the kitchen with these ingredients. They didn't know what to do with them. You have a guy now in Kellen Moore who, say what you want about Kellen Moore, say what you want about the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys offense under Kellen Moore, consistently a top 5, top 7 offense. At one point in time, they were the best offense in the NFL with yards, with points, with any other metric. So Kellen Moore certainly knows how to cook with the ingredients that's in Philadelphia's kitchen. The next question, Justin, unfortunately has to go to you. It is a painful topic to talk about, but we wouldn't be fans if we didn't talk about it. Literally a painful thing to talk about. On the third to last play of the game, we saw something that we didn't expect to see at all, especially not this early into the season. We saw Jordan Love's knee literally pop. And Packers fans across the country and across the world literally were holding their breath. As reports started to come out, we learned it wasn't an ACL injury, which was great. We learned it was an ankle injury first, which made me certainly concerned because of the pop. We found out that it was an MCL sprain that should keep Jalen on the show for about 3 to 4 weeks. On the high end, 6 weeks.
I felt bad for y'all too. Man.
Malik Willis is our quarterback. Which is crazy, but Malik Willis is our quarterback. Over the next 3 to 6 games, Justin, how important is it? Or I'll put it this way. How many games do the Packers need to win with Malik Willis under quarterback for us, or under center at quarterback, for us to keep our playoff hopes alive when Jordan Love returns? Out of 3 to 6, let's say on the high end he misses 6 weeks. How many games do you think Malik Willis needs to win in order for us to keep our playoff hopes?
I'm not answering that question because he's not going to win any. I'm not going down this hopeful. I'm not going down this what ifs or whatever not. Like, reality is, if Malik Willis is under center for you, you're not going to win games, and that's reality situation. Tennessee Titans found this out the hard way, and that's why they moved on to Will Levis, who himself threw a win, very, very winnable game against the Chicago Bears. In fact, Tennessee Titans had no business losing that game. Like, they did not win that game. If we want to go down that route, like, the Tennessee Titans literally handed that game to them on Soldier Field. I'm not going down these probabilities with you. The answer is none. Like, the moment that the Packers brass said that, you know, they were not targeting a veteran quarterback, they were not looking at Ryan Tannehill, which I know, I'm not sure if that was not truth. What I've heard is that Ryan Tannehill wants to be a starter. He does not want to be a part-time starter and then be a backup for whenever an injured quarterback returns. So I'd have to think that they probably, you know, did their whole they probably went after Ryan Tannehill and he told them no. Like, the only way you're winning these games is that your defense legit has to take over every single game. Like, you're going to have to average 10 to 15 points surrendered. And even then, you're still going to have to put points on the board.
Wait a second. Do you know who we have on our schedule the next 6 weeks, man? I feel like you're being really dark. You're being really, really dark right now. We have the Indianapolis Colts, who don't get me wrong. The Colts just put up 27 points on the Texans. We're losing on Sunday. Don't get me wrong. We're 0-2. I got you.
Keep coming.
We're going to Tennessee. We
right, and again, a Tennessee Titans team.
Justin, you could play quarterback. We're winning that football game.
Hold on.
We are winning. Team. I just watched Will Levis go to Chicago and play the worst game of quarterback I've ever seen with my own 2 eyes.
All right. So let's list them one by one. I'm going to name first. So let's start with the teams, and I'll go for you. Go ahead.
We're losing to Indianapolis. We can skip that.
Right. So the Indianapolis Colts just hung 27 points on a Houston Texans team.
We're not winning that game. We're not winning that game. I got you.
So next game,
we're playing Tennessee.
Hold on. Tennessee Titans team, as bad as Will Levis is, right? If he doesn't make that last mistake of throwing away the football into willing arms, they win that game in Chicago.
Why they win that game in Chicago?
Against a top 5 defense back at the end of the season, because that Chicago defense
win that game in Chicago because Caleb Williams crapped all over the football field.
But regardless,
Malik Willis, as bad as Malik Willis is not showing up to any football game completing less than 50% of his passes for less than 100 yards.
Minus that last Will Levis mistake, The Tennessee Titans are going into Chicago and winning that game. So next team keep coming.
But are they winning that game because of how well they played, or are they winning that game because of how poorly Caleb Williams was? I think they're winning that game because Caleb Williams didn't play well. If Caleb Williams plays well, the Bears win that game a lot more comfortably than they did.
Hold on. Do you think, then the answer to you then, do you honestly believe that Caleb Williams, the number 1 overall pick, who has spent the entire offseason going through the Bears program, is going to be worse than Malik Willis? Malik Willis, who the Tennessee Titans, the same Tennessee Titans who just lost, did for absolutely nothing, comes into our program with absolutely nowhere. You think that Caleb Williams is going to be worse than that? And the answer is no.
You think Malik Willis is going to be worse than 14 of 29 for 93 yards? Justin.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
my gosh.
Yes. Like,
you know,
I watched Malik Willis.
My father, when I was a kid, my father used to tell me all the time, because I used to never do my homework, or I would do it and not turn it in. My father told me all the time that you actually have to try harder to get an F in a classroom than you do to get an A. What you know how hard Malik Willis has to try to suck in week 3 to play worse than.
Like, I'm sure
what you're saying to me is unfathomable right now. What you're
because
even
these are the words. These are the words.
You're being, you know, you're being anti-black.
Nope.
You're being
I'm
anti-black.
telling you right now, Shane, these are the words of a man who's never seen Malik Willis play at a pro level. I've watched him play.
I've watched Malik Willis play football. What do you mean?
I'm telling you right now, the stats that Caleb Williams put up on Sunday are going to be Joe Montana-esque.
All right, let's do this.
What you're going to see
right now. I want your word. I want your word right now.
Go for it.
No, listen to me. I want your word right now that if Malik Willis, come week 3, performs better against the Titans than Caleb Williams did on Sunday, that you will buy a Malik Willis jersey and wear it on this show.
I will do just that. I am so.
Thank you. I just want that on the record, on the internet. If Malik Willis does better than 14 for 29 and 93 yards, you will buy a Malik Willis jersey and wear it on this show and apologize to Malik Willis.
I am so sure, right, that I don't have to buy this jersey, that I'm going to put away all of my credit and debit cards, all of them. I can stash them away comfortably, knowing that there is no way. Like, I'm telling you right now, right, the defense is going to have to rise to a level that they have not played in for the last 5-6 years. They're going to have to be so dominant, right? And this is going to be where Josh Jacobs is going to have to make all $48 million of his dollars that we gave him in that 4-year contract. Like, I'm trying not to disparage the young man, but
I was actually, if I can, I know I'm a foreigner here. I know, this is my thing, but I think I agree with you. I think that's where it's going to come down to, not having to rely on Malik, obviously, to win you the game, but having to rely on your defense to beat Will Levis. Like, I think that's where it's going to come down, because you guys got some dogs on the defensive side of the ball that you guys have been paying recently. Just picked up Xavier McKinney, right? You guys have Rashawn Gary, who is one of the most underrated pass rushers in the league. You got Kenny Clark, who is one of the best defensive tackles in the league. You got Preston Smith, another underrated pass rusher. Like, and then you got Walker, and of course you got Jair Island on one side of the field. So I definitely think this is a defense capable of winning you a football game, especially against the Titans. I think from Malik's point of view now, I think the only saving grace that he has is the fact that this is his old team. This is a guy who is used to going up against this defense, almost every day in practice. He's used to seeing Simmons rush coming off the edge, trying to, come in his. They can't really touch him in practice, but he's used to playing behind pressure, under pressure with that pass rush against the secondary. So, And then just coming in with the motivation of playing against the team that let you go, that chose the other guy instead of you. I think just coming from an athlete's perspective, I think that's the only saving grace that Malik would have this game, just in terms of getting like a revenge, just in terms of it being sort of like a revenge game, a revenge mindset against his former team. And then you guys having the defense that you do, one of the best defenses, if not the best defense in your division, so I definitely think, I mean, there is some saving grace in the matter. But I wouldn't be surprised if, if it goes
just
the other
remember,
way.
the Tennessee Titans saw enough of Malik Willis in 1 year that the very next year they drafted Will Levis. The very next one.
I just want to reiterate one more time that Justin Marvel, former host of the hashtag This Justin Sports Show, current co-host of the Pack a Punch podcast, has agreed to buy a Malik Willis jersey when Malik Willis does better than Caleb Williams, 14 of 29 for 93 yards against the Tennessee Titans. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page. You can stash the cards all you want.
Right?
You can stash them all you want. You're going to need to pull them out of that stash after week 3 and buy that.
I hope you also understand, right? Caleb Williams did not turn over the football. I just want to remind you of that, right?
That's fine.
Okay. Just remember that.
14 of 29 for 93 yards. Because here's the thing.
Zero interception.
If Malik Willis gives you 25 for 28 for, let's say, 200 flat, a touchdown, and a pick, that's still better than 14 of 29 for 93 yards. 100%. 100%.
Fair enough, but 25 of what?
I'm just telling you. He's not going to throw the ball more than probably 20 times. I'm just saying. An interception doesn't dead this, is all I'm saying. Don't try to sway this in Caleb Williams' favor. So you can.
All I'm telling you is that it has to be a heavy Josh Jacobs, Emmanuel Wilson, Marshawn Lloyd game. That's why it has to be going forward, and everything that Malik Willis does,
man.
Everything has to be off of play action, or it has to be very getting the ball up quickly. So a lot of wide receiver, tight end screens. It has to be get the ball out in rhythm, and cut the field in half, do a lot of play action, a lot of read option, roll up, naked bootlegs. It cannot be 5 and 7 step drops. It just can't be.
Have some faith in Malik, bro. That's all I'm saying. Have some faith in Malik. And by the way, since Justin didn't want to give me an answer, I'm going to give you an answer. We are going to lose on Sunday to Indianapolis. I think we're going to win against Tennessee. I do. We're going to drop our game to Minnesota. I think we'll drop our game in LA. I do think that we are going to win in Arizona. And here's why. Here's why I think we're going to beat the Cardinals. When you look back at that game on Sunday, the Cardinals were only in that game because of Josh Allen's mistakes. Josh Allen fumbled the ball twice in that game, and they were able to capitalize on that very early on. And if Malik Willis is quarterback by then, and I think I do believe, honestly, I do believe that Jordan Love will be back before the Cardinals game. But if for some reason, they want to keep Malik in there for a couple extra weeks just to be sure, which I am more than a fan of. I will always say I am always in the favor of delaying a return as opposed to rushing him back and then put him on the show for the rest of the year. I'm always in favor of that. So if Malik Willis is still quarterback in Arizona, I think we win that game. What I need, though, what I absolutely need is I need number 10 on the field against Houston. That's what I need. That's what I need. Because that is not just a Packers versus Texans game. That's not what that is. We all want to see Jordan Love and CJ Stroud head-to-head during that game. We want to see that. And so I need him to be back. But I will say this, Justin, as slim of a reality as it might be, I do think there's legitimate validity in the idea just because the tougher part of the schedule isn't until, once we get into November, really, post this Texans game. If Malik Willis, I'll put it this way, because we can win football games without Malik Willis playing well, obviously. If somehow there is a reality where Malik Willis is playing well for his standards, and well for his standards means making the good decision with the football, not turning the ball over, not being the reason why we're losing, the Jimmy G, the Jimmy G expectations. If Malik Willis is playing there, I think there's legitimate consideration within the organization to delay Jordan Love's return until he absolutely needs to come back, and it's absolutely 100%. I think that's valid. Like if Malik Willis goes out, let's say these next 3 weeks, because I think right now it's projected that the earliest Jordan Love can realistically come back is against the Vikings. Let's say Malik Willis goes out in Indianapolis. We lose that game, but he plays well for his standards. We go to Tennessee. We lose that game. He plays well to his standards. I think there's a possibility that Malik Willis stays simply because you don't want to rush Jordan Love back and then risk him being done for the rest of the year.
The reason I would say no is because I've always said you can't predict the future in any sport, particularly football. And windows have a funny way of closing because, especially with injuries. So, for argument's sake, because the Packers, whether we think this or not, the Packers look at this as a championship type season. Like, that's what they're viewing this. They honestly believe they can win a championship this year. And if they lose those 2 games, once Jordan Love is good to go, no matter how well Malik Willis plays, they're going to put Jordan Love there. And the reason being is people are going to have to get paid at some point. Jordan Love is the first, and these players, all of these playmakers are not going to stay on rookie contracts forever. So I say that to say at some point you're going to lose at least 2 of these players. You're not going to be able to pay everyone. You already paid Jordan Love $55 million per season. At some point, you're going to have to pay Christian Watson. So at some point, you're going to have to pay Romeo Dobbs. At some point, you're going to have to pay Jaden Reed. Like, you're not going to be able to pay. And then you've already paid your running back. You've already paid your safety. That's why right now, especially as Jordan is not on a rookie level contract anymore, they're viewing this season as, I don't want to say a championship or bust, but these next 2 seasons, they're going to go after a championship as hard as they possibly can because you're going to lose pieces along the way. So that's why I see the moment that Jordan Love can play, he is going to play.
That's a good point. This is not going to be a Dak Prescott, Cooper Rush situation for sure. For sure. I'd feel a lot better if we had Cooper Rush at backup. I'll be honest with you. Before we get out of here, because I know there's a lot of people that might be wanting to watch the debate. I know I certainly want to watch the debate. I've been watching it on mute for the past 26 minutes. I would like to listen to Donald Trump lie to me on national TV. Subtitles super quickly, because Justin and I have already pretty much talked about who's winning on Sunday, and we both have the Colts winning, rightfully so. Shane, real quick, can you run through super quickly, make your predictions for who you have between the Eagles and the Falcons on Monday Night Football?
Wait. Are we really doing this? Really?
I'm trying to show respect to my man Shane, bro. I'm trying to give him an opportunity to talk about his team a little bit, bro.
Fair enough.
Justin, show some respect, bro. He took time his busy schedule to come listen to us yell about Malik Willis for the last 20 minutes, and you don't want me to give him a shot to talk about his team.
Sorry.
That's all good.
I know Mama and Papa Marville taught you to be hospitable to your guests. Okay, just let him talk for a little bit. We know who's going to win the game. Just let him. You know, who do you have winning? You know who you have winning. By how much? And who do you think are the X factors in this game for Philadelphia and Atlanta on Monday night?
Yeah, I'll make this quick. I mean, Eagles are definitely coming away with that dub. I mean, first of all, it's at the link. So even if this was a away game, it would be a win. But the fact that it's at the link, I mean, that's definitely going to be a dub. I do think, looking at that Falcons-Steelers game from Sunday, I mean, TJ Watt tore their offense apart. I mean, there was nothing Kirk could really do back there. It's like TJ Watt was back there almost every other play. Actually called 2 of his sacks back. He had 1, but they called 2 of them back because of, other things that were happening on the field. But I definitely think that our defense as a whole can have a similar impact against Kirk Cousins, who is not a mobile quarterback, back there. I definitely think that our defense can have a similar impact against the Falcons in this game because of the type of pressure that Vic Fangio was sending against y'all, the type of pressure he was sending after Jordan Love. Having Zach Bond, who was an unsung hero on that defense side of the ball on Friday as well. Having Zach Bond come up as that 5th rusher a lot of times, sending Nakobe Dean a couple of times, Bryce Huff.
You almost had 2 picks on Friday.
Yeah. So the linebacker play was scary. The D line started heating up as the game progressed, especially in the second half. So I definitely feel like that is something that we can that we can exercise and exploit this coming game in terms of just just overwhelming Kirk Cousins with pressure. He's not going to be someone that can move around the pocket like Jordan Love, so I definitely think that is something that we have on them on that front, having with us being able to exploit sort of the weaknesses in that O-line. And then our secondary, the Falcons receivers are good, but I mean, they're definitely not as good as the Pack as you all's receiving trio, right? I mean, Drake London is not as good as Christian Watson. Darnell Mooney is not as good as Jaden Reed and Romeo Dobbs. Clearly, I think the second person that they would have to worry about is Kyle Pitts. Which I think the safeties and tight ends wouldn't have a difficult, wouldn't have the most difficult time in the world, kind of on that coverage aspect. So I definitely think this is more than a winnable game. I mean, our secondary learned a couple of lessons the hard way, from Jaden Reed on Friday. I think Vic Fangio is already adjusting on that front for a less talented receiving group in Atlanta that we're going to see. So I definitely think this is a winnable game. And I'll say my X factors for this game, one is going to be Jalen Hurts. Has to be better than he was on Friday for sure. I don't care who we're playing. Jalen Hurts has to be better than what we saw last Friday. He has to be, even if he's not someone who's going to win us the game every game because of the weapons that he has. He can't be someone that can put the team in a losing position, throwing all those questionable balls, a lot of which could have been interceptions, so I definitely think Jalen Hurts is going to be an X factor. Another X factor I'm going to say is Quinyon Mitchell. I think Quinyon Mitchell is going to be an X factor for us every game this season. Having another cornerback who we can count on to strap things down, to eliminate his side of the field in both man and zone coverages on the opposite side of Darius Slay, I think is going to be key, because that was a weakness for us last year. James Bradbury couldn't cover himself with a blanket to take a nap. I mean, there was nothing. James Bradbury, that was like the biggest and most unexpected decline that I think the NFL saw as a whole from any player in the league was James Bradbury. So I definitely think Quinyon Mitchell.
Deshaun Watson would like to have a conversation with you, by the way. Yeah.
I think, the fact that wasn't expected last season, I think was an issue, because I don't know why people are still holding out hope for Deshaun Watson. Hasn't been the same since 2019. You know what I mean? So I feel like at this point that should have been expected. But I see what you're saying. It's a toss up. It's a toss up between those two. But yeah, I think having Quinyon Mitchell, who proved himself early, against the Packers on Friday night, is going to be key for this secondary, especially, let alone defense as a whole, is going to be key for the team's success. So I definitely got Quinyon Mitchell. I don't see him having a problem guarding Drake London or Darnell Mooney, when it comes to those one-on-one matchups. So I think that's going to be key. I think those are my main two. Another X factor who I would say would be probably Jalen Carter, because I think the pass rush in Philly is going to start with Jalen Carter as we progress this season. I think he has the most potential out of anyone on that front four. So I definitely think in our pass rush is something that we are going to need as we progress this season because of the different offenses we're going to be seeing. So I definitely think Jalen Carter, Quinyon Mitchell, Jalen Hurts are going to be vital in this game, not only in this game, but just in the season, this coming season as a whole, for sure.
One of my kids from work is currently watching the show, and it's 9:30, which means it's past his bedtime. And and I only know that because he's spamming stupid comments on. I don't even know what these things are here. I feel so old. He's got like Candy Crush emojis or whatever these are. I do want to say this real quick about Atlanta before we go. Kirk Cousins on Sunday was 16 for 26, completed 62% of his passes. He had 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. He was sacked twice. To all the people out there that questioned why Michael Penix was drafted, this is why. Because if Kirk Cousins doesn't play, even if we don't even get 70% of what we saw from Kirk Cousins before he popped his Achilles, by week 4, do believe the announcement's coming. Week 5, Michael Penix Jr. will be starting for the Atlanta Falcons, and there will be no more Kirk Cousins in Atlanta. You don't want to hear that, right? Because they just paid Kirk. But we got to remember Kirk is 36. He's on the wrong side of 30. He's coming off of a major injury, and he just dropped a dud against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I know historically have been known for having very physical, very tough defenses. I got that. But in the home opener, to muster 10 points, you give away 2 possessions. Do keep in mind, the Steelers did not score a touchdown on Sunday. This is the second time in my lifetime that I can think of where the Steelers have won a football game kicking 6 field goals. I think the last time they did it was when they beat the Chiefs in the playoffs. They only kicked field goals. They won that game as well. This is before, obviously, Pat Mahomes arrived. I don't know how this happens. Like, and I understand that the wide receiver core is not that great, but you still have Drake. You still got Drake London, who I think is still talented. I'm not super high on Darnell Mooney, but he's no scrub, I wouldn't say. Kyle Pitts found his way into the end zone for the first time it feels like his entire career. And Bijan Robinson actually had a decent game when they were giving him the ball. If Kirk Cousins can't turn it around and get back to 70% of itself by week 4, Michael Penix will be the starter for the Falcons moving forward. Mark my words. And that is why, despite paying Kirk Cousins, they drafted Michael Penix in April. Is just in case Kirk Cousins didn't return to form, they'd have a young guy they can go up there and say, you know what, just get your reps in, bro, and we'll see you next year. And I think that's what's going to happen. Because Kirk Cousins looked god-awful. He looked like Washington Kirk Cousins. Before
Shane. I think Shane wanted to get in one last point.
Yeah. Sorry, just real quick. I did want to add to, kind of your point on Bijan Robinson. I think this is going to be a big game for Devin White and Nakobe Dean coming up as well. Because Bijan Robinson, you give him enough touches, he's going to get cooking. I mean, he was producing against one of the best defenses in the NFL in the Steelers, so I definitely think Bijan Robinson is someone who doesn't need to be slept on. I know we talked about receiving threats like Drake London, Kyle Pitts, but Bijan Robinson is one of those guys who can be a receiving threat as well as a running threat. Who's really looks like he's going to be the best offensive player on this Falcons team, sort of like a Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey-esque type of player. So I definitely think this is going to be a big game for Devin White, who's coming back healthy, and Nakobe Dean in terms of being those linebackers who usually are tasked with covering the running backs who are coming out of the backfield on those flare routes, wheel routes, or so forth. So I definitely think it's going to be a big game for them as well. But no, for sure, piggybacking off your point, Falcons offense is no scrub. There isn't a unit of scrub players. Darnell Mooney is a good number 3 option, especially when you have Kyle Pitts and Drake London on that same offense. And then it will be interesting to see how different this offense looks with Michael Penix back there instead of Kirk Cousins, for sure.
It's always a pleasure, Shane, to have you on the show. Hopefully we can have you on one more time in the postseason if Joan Love can get his life and his leg back under him. Thank you guys for watching. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on Instagram at packapunch.pod for more Packers content and for more of me and Justin. So for my guy, Shane Fordham of the No Shame with Shane, and Justin Marvel, my partner in Packers Crime, this is Marcus of the Pack a Punch podcast signing off. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, go Pack Go.